Hello, and welcome to another episode of the IBMS podcast. I'm Rob Dabrowski, the editor of the Biomedical Science magazine, and in this instalment, I'm joined by Andrea Johnson, the Cellular Pathology Manager and Microbiology Manager at Wye Valley NHS Trust. The discussion covers a range of areas from leadership and lab transformation to improving staff morale and creating a positive culture. I hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you so much for joining me today, Andrea. Lovely to see you. Why don't we start the podcast by, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do currently and your route into the profession. That would be fantastic.
Thank you for having me. I'm Andrea Johnson. I'm currently the Cellular Pathology Manager and Interim Microbiology Manager at Wye Valley Trust. My route into the profession, I'm going to go back to when I was 16 and I loved science and I really wanted to do environmental management at uni. And I got a work experience placement at the Environment Agency and I had the best time. I got to do all sorts of things. And one of the days I spent in the laboratory and I went home and I said to my parents, I am never, ever working in a laboratory. It was awful. Around the same time, my nan had passed away and I had visited her in hospital. And I remember saying to my parents, in fact, they remind me frequently of these two events, I'm never working in a hospital. So I've spent my career working in a laboratory in a hospital. So famous last words from a 16-year-old me. I did do science at A-level and unfortunately I always got poorly. So I ended up going through clearing and I got a place doing biomedical science at Manchester Metropolitan University. I did a placement year at the Christie Hospital there. I think I was the second cohort through the registration portfolios. Stayed on through my third year as an MLA and then took a post at the Christie Hospital after my degree. I then moved to Hereford as it was at the time technically nearer to home. Now it is home. And I went on to do my master's degree, distance learning with Ulster University. I became a senior biomedical scientist after my master's. I was the training lead, so I did a CEP in training. I did another qualification in training at Hereford and Ludlow College, which was through Warwick University, NQF. I've also done the CEP in management. Became the laboratory manager in 2019. Last year, I decided to do my HSD. I wrote myself a list in 2023 of things I wanted to do with my career. And I wanted to be a fellow and I didn't want to pay to go through the experiential route. I wanted to put myself through the exams. So I sat the exams and got my fellowship and my HSD in management. And then I started my PhD in January of this year.
If we go back to 16-year-old you, Andrea, why did you think, I never want to work in a lab, I never want to work in a hospital?
Honestly, it was the smell. I think the smell of a hospital put me off. And then when I was in the Environment Agency work experience, I was very fortunate. My dad drove me there every day. It was a long drive from our house. And we'd done all sorts of things. We'd been out electrofishing and electrocute fish and seeing what they were and measuring them and putting them back in the water, doing water samples, from different rivers and lakes. And, we'd been out in the field and we'd done all these things. And the day in the laboratory with all the chemicals and, what we had to do, I think the smell put me off. It doesn't bother me now I'm older. But I would say it was that. I really didn't enjoy it. And then I think when I got to A-levels and we all got to dissect a fish, I thought, oh no, actually this is quite cool. Wow. So I think that changed me. I was so set on what course I wanted to do, what masters I wanted to do. I wanted to do a masters in the dynamics of snow and ice. And my masters was in biomedical science. Yeah, it was a big U-turn from like plants and the environment to human biology is the way forward.
Well, I'm glad you got over those olfactory issues and some horrible smells and pulled through.
Thank you.
Also, another thing for your kind of introduction there is you've crammed in an incredible amount of training. Is kind of learning and professional development something that's very important to you?
It's very important to me. CPD is important to me, and it's one of the talks that I do to any new trainee within our department, and we do those learning through the registration portfolio. But I think it's really important to be fully informed of what's going on and what developments there are, not just for you, but for your team. So for you, learning, improving skill sets and finding what you're interested in and developing. But for everybody else, it's about investing in them. So I think that, to me, learning and CPD and having that opportunity is a real positive for anyone's career.
And tell us about your job at the moment, what the role involves, what your team's like, what the lab's like.
So my job at the moment, managing microbiology and histology. So technically I am the cellular pathology manager. So the usual managing, the day-to-day, the staff, HR policies, implementing policy, and on the leadership side. So driving projects forward, the direction of the laboratory, sort of new things that we're doing. I really love both of my teams. I think that people make a team and everybody's different. And that's really important in a team, because if everybody was always on the same page, you might be completely in the wrong book. It's really important to have a really good team. And I'm very fortunate in both laboratories. So microbiology laboratory, obviously I don't have a lot of say in the microbiology side of things because I don't actually know microbiology. It's not my discipline. But I have been very fortunate to go in there and the ask was for 3 months. Can you manage the microbiology laboratory for 3 months? And I've been doing it for 18 now. I am handing them back, hopefully next week, to somebody who knows microbiology. But it's been a real pleasure, and we have achieved a lot in a short space of time.
Yeah, I should mention at this point, you've recently won an IBMS Award for all this amazing work that you're describing that we're going to talk through. I'll quickly read out a sentence from the judges, if that's all right, Andrea, just so everyone's got a bit of context. And they said, this category truly demonstrates the fantastic people working in our laboratories. Often under duress, they manage to keep morale high despite the many pressures on the service. Endorsing statement from Andrea's team members, from admins to consultants, show how much she is valued and worthy of this award. How did you feel when you won that award, Andrew? Were you expecting to win?
It was an honour just to be shortlisted for the award. It was the category with the most people on the shortlist. Guy Orchard is the godfather of cellular pathology, and to have my name next to his on the shortlist was a real surprise. And I turned to my colleague when he was given highly commended for the award at the ceremony. I went, "Oh my gosh, he's got highly commended." I went, "Who on earth's beaten Guy Orchard?" And then they called my name out, and I was completely and utterly in shock. I have read some of the submission for the award, and I am humbled, truly. I just see it as doing my job, to be honest with you. But it's something I'm passionate about. So yeah, it was a shock, but it's lovely to have that recognition within the profession.
And from everything I've read about it, completely deserved, Andrea. No need to feel humbled by it at all. But let's talk about your style of leadership first off. Have you got a particular style, a particular approach to leadership? How do you approach it?
To use the proper words, I'd probably say it was democratic and transformational. My dad has always said to me that the most important thing you can do in life is listen. It is important to listen to people rather than react. And active listening is a skill, and to really listen to what someone's saying, because they might not be able to articulate it. There might be something behind that. So I think for me, I would say that I'm a good listener. It's important in my style of leadership to understand what the issues are, what the implications are, and how people may want to resolve an issue. As a team, I'm very aware that my day-to-day is not stood in the laboratory, and if there is an issue in the laboratory, I could quite easily go in there and say, well, I think you should do it like this. But it's not me doing it every day. So I don't think it's right for me to go in and dictate that. I think it's right for me to take the issue and to say, right, this is the issue. How are we going to fix this? We need to get to here, and listen to everybody and come up with a solution that works. I'm a big fan of practicable solutions as well, something that actually works. That's not imagine a one-man band. Sometimes you've got this sort of spectrum of people come to a solution and it's kind of the bare minimum and just scraping around it. And then there's those that have reinvented a one-man band, and you have to do about 10 things in order to satisfy one thing. And I kind of like to be somewhere in the middle and sort of listen to everything, think about practical solution, sort of, talk about the ideas and how we're going to get there. So I think my style of leadership, I would say, is definitely democratic and transformational. And I like to inspire change and moving things forward. I must admit that I prefer change when I'm in control of it. I guess I would say possibly as a leadership style, visionary as well. So, There are plans and places and things that I would like to do and to see for the patients, really. And I guess, that's my style of leadership.
That's great. It sounds like a very modern style of leadership, I suppose, where you're not doing that kind of top-down approach, but it sounds like you're really empowering your team to kind of take control.
As a manager, you have a set of resources. The building's a resource, your equipment's a resource, the trust policies are the resource, HR policies are a resource. But the most important resource that you've got as a manager are your team, are the people. And you have to empower those people. You need to value those people, because what you invest in them, you will get back into the department. And ultimately, it's the patients that benefit from that. So I think valuing the team, empowering people who you work with is the most important thing as a manager and a leader.
Can that be tricky if you've got anyone who's disruptive in the team? Because I can imagine it works perfectly if you've got a great staff, of motivated people. Can that be an issue for people if there is someone who's disruptive and you're trying to empower people, but if you empower someone who's maybe kind of pulling in the wrong direction, can that cause problems?
I think it's important as a manager and a leader to understand all of your team as well. So there's a lot of people management involved, and you really need to know what their strengths and their weaknesses are, what drives them, what motivates them, what their character's like, how they're going to react to things, and that personal touch, what's going on in their life. Is there a reason for a reaction to something? I'm not saying you need to know the ins and outs of everyone's business. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But I think the team that we've got is a close-knit team. And, there are always characters in the workplace that are different, or have a different opinion. And I think it's important to involve everybody. And you find ways around it. You find ways around characters that can be more difficult and to work with them.
Yeah. I mean, we've recently done some kind of training modules on neurodiversity and EDI. And have you got some background in that? Because it sounds like kind of, if I look back at the kind of exam we had to do at the end of this neurodiversity training, the stuff you're saying now is just picking all the correct answers on those. Is that just something that comes naturally to you, or have you had some background in that?
I'd probably say it comes quite naturally, but I have listened to a lot of information and lectures about neurodiversity. I'm dyslexic myself, so technically I'm under that umbrella. I think that understanding that a lot of scientists and people who work in science are neurodiverse, it's important to have an awareness of those traits, those characteristics, how people work, and, to understand the needs of that. It's actually a really interesting thing that you've asked me about. So the Trust at the moment doesn't have a neurodiversity network, but there are some people within pathology at the moment that are really wanting to, drive that and establish that within our trust. And I've been able to sort of act in my position to sort of in between the trust and contacting HR and, liaising with those in pathology to sort of try and get this off the ground. And I've got various resources that I've shared with them. So, yeah, interesting topic. I think it's definitely a hot topic right now. I think being a scientist for over 20 years, I think everybody in our department would probably say most of us have got a touch of neurodiversity, even if they're not diagnosed. So we see and understand those traits. So perhaps it comes naturally to me, but it is definitely something that understanding people is so important in a leadership and management role.
Yeah. And what was the histology lab like when you first took over as the manager there?
It was smaller than it was now. My predecessor actually did retire and return. And he's in the laboratory as a biomedical scientist. It was a much smaller lab. We had a lot less staff. We did utilize a lot of technology that we got with our MLS. It was economies of scale, I guess. We're very fortunate in that because we're small, it's easy to implement stuff and do changes. Bigger laboratories have a lot more impact on huge changes to a system. So when we got our tracking system in, it wasn't that difficult, and we've had it for over 10 years. And I know that we've had people come to the laboratory to look at the tracking system from other trusts. So it was a lot different now, and it's been through a lot of changes. Staffing, I guess, would be the main change, in that it's increased a lot since I've been in my post, along with technology. So obviously we brought in digital pathology. We were the first within our region to do that in the group that we're working together with the West Midlands Cancer Alliance. So it's changed a lot.
And I remember from the awards, I think one of the things cited in the entry was the fact that you've transformed the histology lab and massively improved turnaround times. You just mentioned digital technology there. Was that the driver behind improving turnaround times?
I think everybody wants faster turnaround times. I think there's a great misunderstanding with cellular pathology, and then maybe microbiology a little bit as well, but I'm not a microbiologist. That everything should be done instantly and really quickly, but obviously there's a scientific process to that. The driver for me always is the patients. And I wanted my seat because I wanted to improve the department for our cancer patients. So to be personal for a second, I was married in 2009, and my husband passed away from cancer in 2016. And my driving force to be in the seat that I'm in and to transform the service was him. He went through a rectal cancer diagnosis. I was widowed at 32. That definitely wasn't part of the plan, but that was my driving force to improve the department for cancer patients. Obviously, you've got national guidelines and, the trust want the answer immediately. I mean, histology is blessed in the fact that it's at the end of a patient pathway. And, if you get a patient that's, so many days into the clock ticking, you're expected to turn that work around quite quickly. We're very fortunate in Hereford that we don't have a backlog. We never have. We have a great team in that we're very flexible with the rota. We're very flexible in where we need to focus our energies every day. So, we work very flexibly. There are other things that we've implemented. So there's a chip for prostate needle cores. I've worked at quite a few different hospitals now to implement this chip. So the prostate templates, they come and, there's a lot of needle cores required for these specimens. The chip, you can hold 5 or 6 cores in them, and it significantly reduces the time in the dissection room, embedding and microtomy. The consultants really like them because they're all neatly in a row. They're really easy to look at down the microscope. But it's been a huge efficiency saving for the department. So it's trying things like that out. And, I have a driving force, and I'm not afraid to try different things in orders. They don't always work, but we learn from our mistakes.
So do you have to fight quite hard to get these changes made? Because obviously change normally requires an initial investment. And, there's the argument, which I imagine you put across, about all the long-term savings and the improving things down the patient pathway, making things better for patients. But is it tough to get over that initial moment of, I would like some money for this to make this change?
I think you become better at it the more you do it, and you learn to talk the language of the trust. So I would say that as scientists, squirrel away in the laboratory, in the dark arts, as I call it, we very much have our own language, and each laboratory has their own language. But being in this seat, it's really important to be able to translate that language into a language that people in the trust, the people who are in the business positions, understand the benefit to the patient and the change that you want to make. You become really good at translation and sort of explaining, stripping some of the science out of it, because they don't need to know all the science. They need to know sort of what the end goal is and how you're going to get there and what that looks like. And I think that's a really important skill to have in leadership and management, is being able to be a translator, I guess. So it is challenging, but you learn and you develop.
That's interesting. So as well as being someone who's good at working with teams, you've also got to be great at kind of communication and almost be able to function as a salesman as well, to be able to think, these are the important things that I need to communicate in order to get this done.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to engage stakeholders, and the right people in the trust, and identify exactly who those stakeholders are. Quite often, and I know it's not, it's pathology, when changes are made within trusts, pathology isn't necessarily thought about. They want to bring an additional consultant in or do some additional work or change a process. And there is a knock-on effect to pathology. And it's not necessarily always considered, but I think it's really important that we always put our head above the parapet and we show what good work we're doing in pathology and show the impact it has on patients. And be that salesperson, go out there and show what we're doing, why we want to do it. It's really important.
And one thing I thought was really interesting, you said, was that sometimes it won't work out. Sometimes these things will fail. I don't think that's an approach many people have. Many people are kind of quite scared of failure, I suppose. I find it very interesting and kind of liberating that you're willing to embrace that as kind of something that will naturally happen if you're trying new things.
I think that we learn more from failure than we do by getting it right every time. I remember being a senior and replying to an email, and the clinical director appeared and, why have you done this? Why have you said that? I learned quite quickly about the packing order and what I should and shouldn't done. But if you get everything right all the time, that's fantastic. And, that's great. But I don't think people should be afraid to fail. I think that sometimes some things don't work. And if you really want something in life, if you really want something to work, you will find a way to do it. I truly believe that. And I would say that's true of anything in life. If you wanted to go and learn a new skill or a new hobby and you tried it the first time and you think, oh, this is absolutely terrible. I can't believe, I can't do this. You shouldn't let it put you off. You should keep going, because if you really want to do it, if you're that inspired by something, you should keep going. You learn more from failing.
Brilliant. And before we move on from the histology lab, if you had to pinpoint kind of one change that's had the biggest impact, but maybe for people from other histology labs who are listening, they think, we need to improve our turnaround times, we need to improve our morale. What's the one thing that you would say has been the biggest change to the service from something you've done?
So the biggest change, I would say, is probably embracing the technology that we've had from our MLS provider. And we have an MLS with Roche Diagnostics. And we had a tracking system put in place. And we've also got their analytics, Navify Analytics. I did a talk on that in June this year at sort of one of the Roche days. And it has been a real positive for the laboratory. It has taken away a lot of manual techniques and a lot of manual processes that we do in regards to recording information, and it's all on the tracking system. But the analytics side of it, it's been fantastic in the fact that we can use it for so much of the laboratory. We can use it to improve our quality, what we're auditing, what we're looking at. We can use it for training and seeing where there are training issues and what we need to improve. I've also used it for business cases to back up the reason why I need something or I want something. So, if there's a bottleneck in the dissection room, because we are only Diddy and we have one dissection room, and at the moment we really would like that second dissection room, earmarked an area for it to go, and I've got the analytics to back that up. That's a really hard question, because there's so much I could say. I mean, the prostate chips I mentioned, and obviously digital pathology, huge things that we've done to transform the lab as well. But I think just that, for me, they're just normal everyday work. It's really hard to sort of say what's the one thing. There's been so much.
Well, I suppose it's all one big narrative, and everything weaves in and out of everything else. And I think that's a good answer, Andrea. Let's talk about taking on a microbiology department as someone who has no background in microbiology. How did that come about?
I was asked if I would just manage them for 3 months temporarily while there were some changes taking place. And I thought about it and I thought, well, it's 3 months. It's not too bad. Yeah, I can go in there. What can I do? Should I do it? I weighed it up, talked to my husband, thought about the kids, thought about time. And I thought, yeah, no, go on then. I'll, for me, like I said to you before, my late husband, he was a patient and he didn't just have his specimens go through cellular pathology, care about pathology as a whole, and share a floor with microbiology. And I wouldn't want to see that department suffer or struggle. So I agreed to do it, and I've loved every minute of it.
Has it been challenging working outside your specialty?
Has it been challenging? Yes, definitely. I went in there and I thought, how will I approach this? How am I going to do this? And I went in and I sat with as many staff as I could, and I asked them 5 questions. And the idea of that was to sort of understand a little bit about them, to understand what the positives and negatives were of the department, what they wanted to change, and what people's career aspirations were. So I could see what my team were like, what they wanted, what they liked, what they didn't like, and what I needed to focus my attention on. I went in there and I'd done this exercise, and I went and sat with some of the seniors, and I felt a bit anxious because I don't know microbiology. The sunshine came through the window, and it was sort of April last year, and I said, oh, wasn't it lovely? Sort of, springtime, sunshine's come through. And they said, not really. And I said, why? And they said, campy season. I said, what do you mean? And they said, everyone will get food poisoning now because first barbecues. And I went, okay, this is different. So if the sun's shining in cellular pathology, we're all, isn't it lovely, the sun's shining? And to them, it was like, no, the barbecue season will happen and everyone will get food poisoning. And that means there'll be a change in their workload. So that was a huge revelation to me, that the weather is very crucial to microbiology. So yeah, it was a challenge working outside, trying to understand fundamentally how different their patients are compared to what comes through the door for cellular pathology. But we've made some serious positive changes, and moving forward, and I think there were things that they needed, and I think we've put those things in place. And I am very sad to be leaving them and just going back to CellPath, but I know that they're in a much better place, and I absolutely know that that will carry on.
Can we talk through some of those changes, Andrew? Can you tell us what's been implemented there?
Absolutely. So those questions I asked them, it was very clear to me that the biggest issue was the staffing. I've been there nearly 20 years, and I think they've had double figures of managers. And I think what they needed more than anything was just someone to put them under their wing, a little bit of care, someone to stick their head above the parapet and say, oh, microbiology lab's here and we need these things. I think they've fallen foul of agreeing to take things on and not being funded for it. They needed someone to go in and it's almost like somebody going through your chest of drawers and, reorganizing it and putting it all away nicely. So I feel like that's what I went in and did. I mean, one of those things, we did a management of change. So we looked at the staffing. We asked for the gold standard of staffing. Didn't think we would get anything, but we were successful in getting more staff for the microbiology laboratory. I mean, one of the issues they had was retention as well for all the staff, not just the managers. We've, been successful in promoting, bringing people through, making sure that the career pathways are available to the staff and that they are taking those opportunities. So that's one of the things. The staffing and the management of change was huge. The winter season was interesting. So again, the weather. The winter season, I've never known anything like it. The quick changes, the trust, the expectations on that department, and how they fulfill those needs. And I sat there the one day and I said, how do you feed back to the trust about how your winter season has been? What's the mechanism? Is there a meeting? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, how do you tell the trust how bad this has been? But all these things are happening and we're trying to control this, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that. But how do you feed that back? They said, oh, well, we don't. And I said, well, shall we do a winter review? Let's do a winter review. I said, I'll come up with a template. If there's any sections missing, let me know. We'll add them in and we'll give the trust the information. And, we'll ask for earlier winter planning and what that looks like for the laboratory. And we did. And it was a great piece of work. I can't take credit for a lot of it because I didn't write a lot of it. They fulfilled that piece of work, and we had a great meeting in the trust about the plans for this winter and what that looks like. And, we've got a more robust plan in place. I say we, it's the royal we. They've got a more robust plan in place for this winter season. So that's been huge. And I think it's just empowering them and the seniors. I didn't just go in and want to manage. I wanted to kind of see what the issues were and be able to give them the skill set to deal with it. I didn't want to just walk away from it and then put another manager. I wanted to help the team, to sort of empower them. And they are a fantastic team. They are an absolutely fantastic bunch of people. And we have a lovely working relationship across the both laboratories now on the top floor. So, yeah, we've made some great changes.
It sounds almost like your lack of microbiology background can work to your benefit because you're able to come in, empower the people. You know how in politics, sometimes if someone's going to be the environment minister, they don't want them to have an environmental background because they'll come with preconceived ideas about what they want to do. If they come and they're not from that background, they can just absorb all the information and lead a team forward. Well, I think that's the theory of politics. It quite often doesn't work. In this case for you, I think it really has worked incredibly well coming in without that background.
I think so. I'd hope they'd all agree. I have loved it. And to be honest with you, I've learned so much that I didn't ever think I would learn. And, I mean, they have lasers in their lab. That is so cool, And like when we take people around or I go and do talks at schools and things, I'm like, they've got this machine, it's called a mold, it's got a laser in it. That's so fantastic. That's so exciting. I feel very grateful that I've had the opportunity. And I feel very grateful for everything that I've learned. I have said that I do feel that they deserve a manager that knows microbiology, because sometimes you get asked things in meetings and I go there as the manager and I'll say, oh, X, Y, and Z. And I'll say, oh, give an answer, but I'll say, I need to check with the seniors because I don't have that microbiology knowledge. Mm-hmm. I would need to check what platform or where we could take that on. So there are advantages, I think, absolutely, to, in biomedical science and not politics, to knowing your discipline and being able to lead and manage that.
When's your last day with them?
I'm actually not there on my last day. I'm actually going to be at Congress. It's Wednesday next week. So yeah, I believe that's the 24th. But yeah, next week's my last day. So yes, I never moved offices. I kept my office in Cellular Pathology, and I'm very grateful for the last 18 months, the amount of steps that I've got in walking between two labs. So there's another positive. So yeah, next week.
One of the things that was mentioned in your awards entry was a whirlwind approach to problem solving. What's a whirlwind approach, Andrea? It sounds chaotic. I imagine it's not.
I think that's probably how they would describe me. Going in there, absorbing all the information, and then, sort of really dividing it up and sort of, to me, I called it the pillars of pathology. And what we need, we need really good quality. Who's on the quality team? Who does this? Who does that? Getting everything absorbed and then being like, right, where are the issues? How are we going to fix that? Who's going to lead on that? Have you done this? Have you done that? How are you going to do that? How are you involving people? Training the same, management the same, the equipment the same. I think one of the things that's been really enjoyable about this whole process and having microbiology is being able to say, well, actually, we've got a document like that in CellPath. Why don't we just bring that over? You can have a look at it and adapt it. So maybe the sort of calmer part of the whirlwind is sort of pulling resources and, not reinventing the wheel, but yeah, they probably say that my whirlwind approach, it is literally to absorb all the information and sort of say, right, what are we going to do now? These are the things we need to do. How are we going to get there? And I guess that's what the whirlwind approach is.
Oh, nice. That's a great talent. I haven't got the brain capacity to absorb all that information from loads of different areas and then kind of focus down on something. I end up just getting lost in the quagmire. So yeah, it was great that you've got that quality. One of the things you mentioned earlier, Andrea, is you talked about how you thought it was important to promote the profession. I mean, do you think the profile of biomedical science has improved since, say, the pandemic? There was a fair bit of coverage around COVID, and maybe the public's starting to understand what biomedical scientists do. Where do you think we are at the moment?
That is a really good question. I found the pandemic really fascinating in the fact that we have all trained and we've got this profession and we're on the HCPC register, and they've got people that do testing that weren't. And yeah, I think it did very much bring biomedical science into the public eye, but I think it's like everything, once it's not there, it goes away. I think there is a lack of understanding about pathology, and I think that I've said it before here, pathology is the dark arts. We're not patient-facing. So that is why it's really important that people know what biomedical scientists do. I'm pretty sure the Royal College says it's 95% of all patient pathways, go through pathology. But yeah, people will have a test, a blood sample or a urine, or they have an operation or whatever the test is, a swab, etc. And it gets sent to the labs, and it's like a mythical place. So absolutely promoting biomedical science is important. I think it's important to inspire the scientists of the future. And I think it's also important to promote it within the trust. Let people in, let them see what we do, because it shouldn't be a secret.
And how do you go about doing that? And how do you think other people should go about doing it? Is there any practical advice on we should be doing this in order to raise the profile?
That's a good question. I think it's different. I think you have to obviously be understanding and respectful of your trust and what the policies are. Make sure you engage with the right people. So comms teams, etc. We've a fantastic comms team at WVT. And obviously those that manage me, so the clinical director, general managers, it's important to, make sure they are involved and they understand what you want to do, what that might look like. So Biomedical Science Day is probably the one thing that I am quite passionate about, and done various different things for different years. And it's making sure that everybody who it's going to involve is fully informed, fully on board, but also going back to listening. And I always say when it comes up, does anybody want to do anything different this year? Has anybody got any thoughts? Always listen. I do tend to sort of lead on it, but I always try and see if there's anything anybody would specifically want to do in order to do that. So, it's important that you ask and involve the right people.
Perfect. Andrea, I think that's a nice note for us to leave on. Even when come talking about Biomedical Science Day, you're looking at empowering people, and that seems to be something that's kind of a strong thread throughout your career. And just to say congratulations on all the great work you've done in histology and in the microbiology department, taking all that extra work on. And it sounds like you've done an incredible job. So congratulations on the award. And yeah, thanks so much for all the hard work you did.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to Andrea for taking part in this episode. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. And remember that this episode can be used as reflective learning for your CPD. So please do keep an eye on the IBMS social media feeds and the website for future episodes. Thanks again for listening.